So on March 18, Sony finally unveiled some staggering in-depth information covering most of the technical makeup of PlayStation 5, and while we did learn some very interesting things from a technical and hardware standpoint, they didn't show us any physical parts such what the CPU or the GPU looks like, and I'm sure I'm not the only one being a bit disappointed after the presentation ended. Let me know if you were a bit disappointed as well. Anyway, the presentation revealed no information what PlayStation 5 looks like, and what we did learn was lots of information on the system core specification. Now, lead system architect Mike Cerny delivered a presentation so technical it felt like you needed to be working as a game developer to fully grasp everything he talked about: power, bandwidth, speed, and immersion. But before we dive deeper, hey, my name is Rob and welcome to Arbin Hardware. I'm your Swedish host and friend with bad posture and poor accent. One key area Sony is doubling down on with the PS5 is the SSD and the ability to load lots of data quickly. This will reduce the loading times for games considerably, and it seems like the operating system will take advantage of this to make picking games to play extremely streamlined. In a comment on the Resetera forums, Kotaku's Jason Schreier revealed that one of the pitches Sony's been made to developers is playing a PS5 game should be as easy as Netflix. I've heard some fascinating things about the PlayStation 5 operating system like this. One of the pitches they've been making to developers is playing a PS5 game should be as easy as Netflix. They want to make players feel like they can load up a game immediately and know exactly how much time a given activity is going to take them. They want to make people feel more inclined to play a short burst rather than only waiting to turn the console on when they have a few hours to spare. This is very exciting stuff for sure, and this will definitely change the way how we consume games on a day-by-day basis for the better for sure. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Yeah, with that said, let's talk about the physical box for a moment. I've seen this question quite a lot. Why hasn't Sony showed the box yet? And why hasn't Sony revealed what PlayStation 5 looks like? It's a very good question, and while we aren't 100% sure, we do have a few hints to why, at least. Something to not forget is that it could just be the fact that they still haven't figured out how to simply solve the cooling part of the box. And sources told Bloomberg back in February that Sony is spending extra on a more powerful and efficient cooling solution for the PS5, and the rise per unit manufacturing cost is making it harder for Sony to pinpoint a final customer price tag for the console. But this type of rumor has suggested that Sony's cooling solution could be a pretty expensive affair and cost more per sold unit than Sony first thought it would. And some new reports coming in suggest Sony is currently trying to solve the PS5 overheating issues, and some unnamed dev sources have told Windows Central's Dan Rubino and Jess Corden that the console is simply getting too toasty for the cooling array to handle. Jason, however, have called these rumors nonsense, but it doesn't change the fact that PS5 will need a pretty beefy cooling solution, and everything from the 7nm AMD SoC to the ultra-fast 5.5GB per second PCIe 4.0 SSD are apparently generating pretty substantial thermals, and Sony's current solution may not be on par with the Xbox Series X huge 120mm fan and vapor chamber cooler, given the PS5 variable GPU scaling, where the CPU and the GPU can adjust their clock speed through a shared power budget, a technology AMD calls Smart Shift. These things also add another potential layer of worry to the heat management issues, especially since the console will scale its GPU power on a game-by-game basis, and the heating problem may force Sony to redesign the system's current cooling and chassis design, and this kind of explains why the PS5 dev kit has this massive ventilation. I do want to stop here for a moment and stress the fact that most of these reports coming in are probably overreactions, and recently Jason Schreier, a guy that's got great insight in the industry, responded to a tweet regarding PS5 heat issue that none of this was in fact true, and I definitely think that we need to treat type of rumors like this with a grain of salt. And while it might be true that the PS5 is running hot and some unit might be falling, we still have no idea what the system design looks like yet, so until then we're gonna have to treat this for what it is. And something that is worth having in mind is that the PlayStation 5 represents a good portion of Sony's quarterly earnings, more specifically 1/5 of their earnings, which is a lot. And having that in mind, mind, it is very unlikely that Sony will ship a product that will overheat. One interesting discussion that's been ongoing lately is how easy or difficult it will be to develop games for PS5, with Sony featuring variable clock speed based on the smart shift technology for laptops in PS5 is raising some concern that game developers have been used to optimize their games for fixed clocks instead of variable clock speed, which led to many people imagine that this would most likely be a problem. However, in a follow-up interview with Digital Foundry's publisher on Eurogamer a few days ago, Sony clarified that the PS5 won't have any problems, as this will be handled automatically by the system. Developers don't need to optimize in any way. If necessary, the frequency will adjust to whatever action the CPU and the GPU are performing. I think you're asking what happens if there is a piece of code intentionally written so that every transistor or the maximum number of transistors possible in the CPU or the GPU flip on every cycle. That's a pretty abstract question. Games aren't anywhere near the amount of power consumption. In fact, such a piece of code were run on existing consoles, the power consumption would be well out of the intended operation range, and it's even possible that the console would go into thermal shutdown. PS5 would handle such an unrealistic piece of code more gracefully. Sony goes on to say one of the breakthroughs was finding a set of frequencies where the hotspot, meaning the thermal density of the CPU and the GPU, is the same, and that is what we've done, and they're equivalently easy to cool or difficult to cool, whatever you want to call it. The PlayStation 5 SoC was created with thermals in mind. The CPU and the GPU selection, their frequencies, the RAM and even the SSD, everything was paired up, scaled and customized to reduce the managed heat as efficiently as possible. And Sony explains that the PlayStation 5 hardware design is revolutionary for PlayStation console development. The power supply runs at almost locked power rate to enable constant adequate cooling, whereas the CPU and the GPU frequencies can fluctuate based on the workloads. The result should be smooth, consistent cooling even under most demanding 4K 60 FPS or even 120 FPS with ray tracing activated. And while it's very interesting to see how Sony is solving the frequencies and the power budget and the cooling, it would be false to say that Sony never had any cooling issues in previous consoles. My PS4 Pro, for example, still sounds like a jet engine from time to time, and let me know if yours are doing that as well. But the PS5 will require something much more powerful and advanced to be able to dissipate the heat from the 10.3 teraflop GPU and 8-core Zen 2 CPU, and especially a super fast SSD storage. These will all generate a good portion of heat as well. Anyway, it's going to be very interesting to see how Sony solves this, and while we don't know an exact date where Sony will unveil the box of the PS5, I'm definitely gonna keep you guys up to date on this story. I also want to share another story that originally was picked up by WCCF Tech, where a Crytek engineer says that coding for PS5 is extremely simple, and he adds that PlayStation 5 is the better console. The guy in question, called Ali Saleh, is working as a rendering engineer and was being interviewed by a Persian gaming website Vigiato, where he talked about the power differences between the next-gen consoles. Now, Saleh said that developing for the PlayStation 5 was extremely simple and that reaching the peak performance on the PS5 is much easier than on the Xbox Series X. Saleh says that developers are saying PS5 is the easiest console they have ever coded on to reach its peak performance, and software-wise, coding for the PS5 is extremely simple and has so many abilities that can make developers so free, and in total, I can say PS5 is the better console. The interview has, however, since been deleted, and it kind of raises the question: is Sony's console really that much slower than Microsoft's upcoming Series X? Honestly, I think we should treat all of these rumors with a grain of salt, but I definitely don't think there's going to be a massive difference, performance difference between the consoles. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please share PS5 or Xbox Series X. And I want to stress this out yet again, I don't have an agenda. I'm going to buy both consoles, and I'm equally an Xbox fanboy as a PlayStation fanboy, I guess. With that said, watch either of these two videos and I will see you in the next one. I want to thank you so much for sticking around, and I will catch you guys in the next one.